It's time for another award. Coming up at the end of April will be the Malice Domestic convention, which is in Maryland, being held in Maryland. And at Malice Domestic, the Agatha Awards are always given out. Now, the point of the Agathas is to award the best traditional mysteries of the year. Hence, they're called the Agathas after Agatha Christie. There are more categories for the Agathas than if you watched my video on the lefties for Left Coast Crime. There are more categories that are awarded in the Agathas. Now, I'm not going to be doing all of the categories, primarily just because I don't want to. So the categories are Best Contemporary, I will be doing that category. Best Historical, and I will be doing that category. Best First, which I'll be doing. But then, Best Short Story. I don't really like short stories. Every time I try to read a short story collection, it just does not work for me. So I just don't think I'm the best judge of short stories, and so I'm just going to skip that category. The other category I'm going to skip is nonfiction, purely because what I think happens at the Agathas, there's always like a writing guide, and I'm just not going to do that. And also recent true crime. I don't really like to read true crime. I will read historical true crime, like give me a book about Jack the Ripper, I'm all over it. But contemporary true crime, I don't want to do it. So I'm skipping that category as well. And then the final category is children, young adult, and I will be doing that category. So I will, same format as I used for the Left Coast Crime video, I'm going to take each category on. I'll give you the list of nominees and then come back around, give you a synopsis of the first chapter, tell you who my vote is for, and then I will predict who I think the voters will vote for. I think I got 75% right. 3 out of 4 for Left Coast Crime. I'm not really being honest. I kind of got one right, not really. I've never attended Malice Domestic, so I don't really know how those voters vote. However, I'm tending to think they're going to lean towards cozier. Just a huge assumption. The dogs are playing right next to the camera. You can hear that. It's just them being dogs. Okay, we are going to start with the nominees for Best Contemporary Novel. Now, there are far more nominees for Agathas than there are for the lefties, which is the last time I did this video, a video like this. And that video was extremely long. So because there are more books nominated for Agathas, and I'm even not doing 2 of the categories, I'm going to do it a little bit differently, and hopefully it will move a little bit quicker. So I'm just going to run through each of the nominees or the book that I'm reading instead of the nominee if it's an earlier book in the series, give you a little bit of a synopsis of the book, and then tell you what my choices are, all in one go. So for Best Contemporary Novel, the first nominee is A Collection of Lies by Connie Berry, but I am reading the second book in the series, A Legacy of Murder, because A Collection of Lies is the 5th book in the series. This is the Kate Hamilton series by Connie Berry, and in A Legacy of Murder, Kate is visiting her daughter, who is an Oxford student and is working on an internship at Finchley Hall. And Kate is there, she is touring the grounds of the estate, and they come across the body of another one of the interns immediately. Now, in the first book in the series, Kate started a relationship with a detective. So immediately upon finding the body, who does she call but this detective she's in a relationship with to come and investigate? Kate is a widow. She's an American. She's a widow. She's been widowed for about 3 years. So this whole new relationship thing is all brand new to her. So I can imagine that there's going to be some of that stress that she has as the mother of adult children, but starting to be dating again. And I do like Barry's writing. So this one is a contender for me. The next nominee is A Midnight Puzzle, which is third in the Secret Staircase series by Gigi Pandian. And I'm reading under Lock and Skeleton Key, which is the first in the series. Our main character, Tempest, is a very successful Vegas magician. However, she is been involved in some controversy as one of her illusions went dramatically wrong, and she believes that she was set up by her stage double, and she's wondering how she can get herself out of this so that she can get her career back. But she has actually been forced to move home to the small town that she grew up in, where she has moved back into her parents' home. And her father owns a construction company that builds things like secret staircases and rooms behind sliding bookshelves and secret passageways and things in people's homes to, do kind of quirky things with your house. Now, there's a lot going on in this one. So I don't think it's going to be for me, personally. So I wouldn't vote for this one for the Agatha. The next nominee is A Very Woodsy Murder by Ellen Byron, which is a book that was also nominated for a Lefty. And when I initially read the first chapter for the Lefty series, I really enjoyed it. I like the setting because it's close to where I live. It seemed like kind of a quirky concept. These two people who don't have any experience with inn or motel keeping want to buy this mid-century motel, settle down here, and give it a go. It sounded like it would be a good fish out of water book. Now, reading the second chapter for this, because it is also nominated for an Agatha, I think it might have lost me a little bit. We find out now as we progress a little bit further in the book that Dee, our main character, and her friend Jeff, who was purchasing the motel with her, aren't just friends. They actually used to be married to each other. And for me personally, that just seems a little weird. We are getting the setup of what the mystery is going to be, though. They have now purchased the motel together, and they are settling into it and realizing that they may be in a little over their heads because it's going to take so much money to rehab this place. So Jeff is very excited when they get their first booking. Andy is not so excited because the first booking is from a writer that she used to work with in Hollywood, who she doesn't have the best relationship with. So potentially this could be our murder victim. The next nominee is Fondue or Die by Corinna Moss, which is number 5 in the Cheese Shop series. And I am reading Cheddar Off Dead, which is the first in the series. So obviously set in a cheese shop. Our main character has just opened this shop basically 2 weeks ago. She has a background working in cheese shops, and she grew up on a dairy farm. So she has been all cheese all her life, basically. There is a lot of cheese talk from the very beginning. But I don't know if this one's for me. There's just something about it that bothered me. The description of the setting, the setup of the characters, the discussion about just a weird comment about her and her ex-boyfriend or fiance, and this attraction to a shop owner from across the street that just was kind of cringy. So I don't think this one's for me. setting it up to be very formulaic. And the final book that is nominated in Best Contemporary is The Dark Wives by Anne Cleeves, which is number 11 in the Vera Stanhope series. Now, the first book in the series, The Crow Trap, was on my TBR for last year as one of my 2024 goals, and it is also on my 2025 goals. So I need to get this book read. In this very, very quick prologue and first chapter, we have met Bella and her husband Dougie, who is a stroke survivor and can no longer speak. And they live on a farm basically in the middle of nowhere. We quickly shift and find Rachel, who is driving to the middle of nowhere to stay on a cottage that is adjacent to Bella and Dougie's farm, and her sort of trials and tribulations of driving there on a very narrow track, making wrong turns, finally getting there. It's freezing cold, having to turn on the heating elements to make herself a cup of tea, and her, although it's not the best conditions, being very excited to be there because she and Bella are quite good friends and she can't wait to have dinner and have a glass of wine with Bella and get settled in. And then unfortunately she discovers Bella's body. We do not meet Vera in this first initial chapter. It's just the setup of the situation and the mystery. But this is why this series is so popular. The writing was wonderful, and the setting, the stage of the setting was so atmospheric, and yeah, it's just really, the setting is a big character, I think, in the story, or at least it is set off to be that way in the very beginning. So of the 5 books, my personal vote would go to the Anne Cleeves. Which one do I think that the Agatha voters are going to vote for? I would say my top 2 contenders are the Connie Berry or the Anne Cleeves. And I kind of think they'll go for the Anne Cleeves. So I think that the Best Contemporary will be won by The Dark Wives by Anne Cleeves. So I kind of think my vote, my choice is the one that will win this category. The next category is Best Historical. And I'm really, again, surprised at how little crossover there is between the nominees for Agatha's and the nominees for the lefties from Left Coast Crime. It's a bunch of completely different books for the most part. Generally, there's maybe 1 repeat in each category, so it's really interesting. So the first book nominated for Best Historical is a repeat from the lefties, and that is the John Copenhaver second in the Nightingale trilogy, which is Hall of Mirrors, and I am reading The Savage Kind, which is number 1 in the trilogy. This book won the lefty for Best Historical at Left Coast Crime, and again, I think it is kind of jumping ahead here, but I do think this is the strongest book in the running, so it is my prediction and my choice for the Agatha as well. If you didn't watch that video when I talked about this, this is the story of Judy and Philippa. One of them is writing to us from the future. We don't know which one of them it is at the beginning of The Savage Kind. They are teenage friends, and we are told at the very beginning in the prologue for The Savage Kind that they solved crimes together, but they also were guilty of killing someone as well. So in 1948, Philippa's family has just moved from Northern California to Washington, D.C., where she has met Judy in school. Philippa's dad is a naval lawyer, and he is married to her stepmother. We don't know yet what happened to her mom. Judy has been in school there. Judy is adopted. She feels very, very different from her adoptive parents. She feels very much on the outside, like she does not belong with them. They are incredibly wealthy, and she knows that she should be grateful to them, but she just feels like she doesn't belong there. Judy is also obsessed with their English teacher, Miss Martins, and she sort of hints that she knows a secret about Judy's background. She is also having problems with one of the male students, and Judy and Philippa see him, just being very rough with the teacher. And that afternoon, on their way home from school, he attacks Judy and Philippa as well. But they are able to fight him off. This almost had a foreboding gothic type tone to it, and Copenhagen's writing is just amazing. So kind of spoiling the field for everything else that comes after this, but this will remain my pick for if I was voting for the Agathas, and I think it's my prediction. I know it's my prediction to win as well. The next nominee is The Last Hope by Susan Ella McNeill, and it is the 11th in the Maggie Hope series. So I'm reading the first, which is Mr. Churchill's secretary. We are introduced to Maggie, who is British. However, she was raised for the most part in the United States because of having academic parents. And she is now back in London because she has inherited her grandmother's Victorian home after her death. She is kind of stuck there because the war has started, World War II, and she is living with some of her friends, some other roommates who she's sort of has acquired to help make ends meet, and they are all looking for jobs here at the beginning of the war when all the women are entering the workforce. Now, Maggie is a college-educated mathematician. She expects that she should get a job working for the War Office, and she is told that she can be a typist, basically, because all of those types of jobs that she wants are going to men. She's very discouraged, but when she gets a call from a friend offering her the role as Winston Churchill's secretary, she feels like she doesn't have any better options, and so she takes the job. Little does she know that this may have more danger than she would expect it to. She is aware that the woman who had the role before her was killed. It is believed it was a mugging that went wrong, but it really wasn't. So I'm expecting that that will be what she discovers along the way. I really liked this one, and I really liked McNeill's writing as well. And I think it's probably a good, solid, traditional mystery. I just don't think the writing is quite as strong or atmospheric as Copenhagen's writing. The next nominee is The Paris Mistress by Melly Becker, which is number 3 in her Revolutionary War series. And I am reading the first in the series, The Turncoat's Widow. We first meet Philip, who is imprisoned on a British prisoner ship off the coast of Brooklyn during the Revolutionary War. And Philip's in pretty bad shape. Now, he has been selling secrets to the British to make money and decided to basically become a double agent and to document a list of others who are doing the same thing as him, so selling secrets to the British. So he's created this list of traitors, and he's decided to turn it over to George Washington. And then somebody basically ratted him out, and therefore he's on this prison ship, and he's being tortured. So he feels like he's not going to make it, and he tells the prisoner next to him hey, if you get out of here, go see my wife, Rebecca, and get this list from her and take it to George Washington. So this is in 1779. We jump ahead a year to 1780, and Rebecca and her mother-in-law, Philip's mother, are in church, and Rebecca basically gets called out and accused of turning Philip in, that she's the one who turned him into the British, and that she's loyal to the British and she's not loyal to the Americans. She is basically critical. She says this war's been going on for a really long time, and people are hungry and people are tired and people are losing their lives, and Philip is gone, and what's really become of it. So she is critical of the war. So this one is interesting as well. Again, it's an interesting premise. It feels a little like it may be romantic suspense though, because I have a feeling we're going to see that other prisoner pop up, and he could potentially be a love interest for Rebecca. And I don't know how much traditional mystery this is going to be. The next nominee is The Wharton Plot by Mariah Fredericks. And just as you would expect, with Wharton in the title, we are at tea with Edith Wharton and her literary agent, or her publisher. And that's all we get in the first chapter. So I don't know where this is going. Don't really know what's going to happen. If I read the synopsis, I am told that someone that Edith meets at that tea is later going to be shot outside of a club, and she's going to help investigate it. I am just judging these books by the very first chapter. And of all the books in this category, this is probably the least compelling first chapter of all the books that I read. The final nominee in the Best Historical is Amanda Flower's To Slip the Bonds of Earth. And it is Christmas 1903. Our main character is Wilbur and Orville Wright's sister, Katie. And Katie is facing some discrimination. She is college educated as well. So very, very similar to what we see in Mr. Churchill's secretary, a woman who's educated but is being told a man is going to take precedence for any jobs, any roles. She's teaching at a high school, and she wants to teach Greek and is told that a man has to teach that class, even though she's more qualified. Interesting first chapter. Not anything that leads me to a mystery, so not quite as compelling as some of the others. My expectation is that it's going to be one of the competing teachers who turns out to be murdered, and she's going to step forward and try to solve it. And that is not what happens at all. So I'm told by the synopsis that after their first successful flight, Orville and Wilbur are going to come home. They're going to have their airplane plans, and someone's going to steal them, and then the person that Katie thinks is the number one suspect is going to end up murdered. So again, not a greatly compelling first chapter, probably more compelling than the Wharton Plot, but still kind of in the middle of the pack of the nominees. So again, the Copenhaver is my pick and my prediction for Best Historical. The next category is Best First Novel. There's a little bit of overlap with Left Coast Crime. There are two novels in this category that were nominated for Best First in Left Coast Crime, and the rest are new to the race. So the first one is A Deadly Endeavor by Jenny Adams. And we are introduced to Edie, who has returned to Philadelphia in 1921. She has been in Los Angeles for 3 years. She's been trying to recuperate from a virus, from an influenza, and she's suffering from intense migraines. And even being back in California hasn't really done anything. But she's been brought back to Philadelphia because her twin sister has gotten engaged. Unfortunately, she's gotten engaged to the man that Edie thought she was going to marry. At the same time, young women start disappearing from the city. Now, this is not in the first chapter. This is from the synopsis of the book. Young women begin to disappear, and Edie decides that she's going to do some investigating. She meets a war veteran who is working in the coroner's office, and they're going to work together to figure this out. It was a great first chapter, no problems. I liked the writing. I think I will like the character of Edie. There just wasn't a lot there to sink my teeth into, and I didn't get any idea about what the mystery was going to be from the first chapter. The next nominee is Ghosts of Waikiki by Jennifer K. Morita. Now, this book won at Left Coast Crime for Best First Novel. It was not my prediction, and it was not my vote either for when I did that Left Coast Crime video. So I was completely wrong in this category, but this was a popular one. Now, we are introduced to Maya, who grew up in Hawaii, and she has now returned after years of living in San Francisco. She has been a journalist, and with the elimination of most print newspapers, she's basically been having to support herself as a freelancer in San Francisco, one of the most expensive cities in the world. And she has basically been approached to become a ghostwriter for a very, very wealthy businessman in Hawaii who wants to write his family's history. And she's taken the job, so she's had to return to Hawaii. And she's, at the beginning of the book, she is at their estate, and she's waiting to be introduced to him. And she's not loving it from the beginning because she gets to the estate, she's made to wait, she's sort of twiddling her thumbs. And then when she meets him and they start talking about the book, she's not really sure how compelling or how appropriate it's going to be to write about this white man's family, because he's convinced that there would be no Hawaii if it wasn't for him and his family. And so as a native Hawaiian, she is a little on edge about what she's taken on, but it's a job. As she's there that day, she also meets his father, who is in his 70s, and his name is Charles. And over the course of the day, as they're working, Charles goes for a swim in the pool, and he is found drowned. So this does kick off with a bang. I admit that I read 2 chapters in this one. The chapters are very short. And so we did immediately get to the mystery, what happened to Charles, that I'm sure Maya is going to be incredibly involved and figure it out. I will say that the writing, in my opinion, is a bit choppy. And again, I still have more books to talk about in this category, but I'm kind of going to give it away. With the other books nominated here, I think that there were some better books nominated in Best First for the lefties. I would say that Ghosts of Waikiki is probably the best book nominated for Best First for the Agathas. So I think it would get my vote in this field of nominees. But the others are Elizabeth Crowan's The Hounds of the Hollywood Baskervilles. This is a cute first chapter, but I don't think it's quite serious enough in comparison to something like The Ghosts of Waikiki or the last book we're going to talk about in this category. So it's 1940, and we have private investigator and former actress Babs Norman and her business partner Guy, who are sitting in a vet's office with a cat and some kittens. And as they're sitting there waiting to be seen by the vet, Basil Rathbone, the actor who portrayed Sherlock Holmes, walks in with a bunch of flyers because his Cocker Spaniel is missing. Babs views this as an amazing opportunity to get a very high-profile client for their detective agency. She approaches him, she gives him her business card, explains that they're very willing to take on pet cases. They're, for example, there with a cat and some kittens. And he says, hey, if you can find my dog, I was going to give a $100 reward, but if you can find it since you're a professional, I will give you a $1,000 reward. At the same time, he brings to their attention that the fox terrier who plays Asta in the Thin Man series of movies is also missing, and there is also a reward out for his return. So Babs starts thinking, wow, this could be a golden opportunity to find 2 famous dogs in one go. And they decide, obviously, they're going to investigate. Thought the writing was good. Again, very short chapters, but we got right down to it. We know what the mystery is. We know what we're going to be looking for and solving. And I did like this one. I just don't think that voters are going to take this one as seriously, like I mentioned, as Ghosts of Waikiki. The next book is by Elle Jaffray, Threads of Deception. Now, this is a very interesting concept, and we are introduced to Claire, who is an attorney who has been living in Washington, D.C., and she is on her way back to the small California town where she grew up. And when she lands in San Diego, she is detained by Customs and Border Patrol because she does not have a foreign passport. Now, Claire was involved in an explosion in her law office in Washington, D.C., and she is the only survivor. And post that explosion, she has something that I had never heard of called foreign accent syndrome, which makes her speak with a very thick French accent, even though she was born and raised in California. So obviously, when she lands in San Diego and she's detained because she doesn't have a passport, and they hear her speaking with a very thick French accent. Now, there were a few things that were really asking me to blur that line. Number one, why did they let her on the plane if there was a question about her nationality? Because when you land, you get off the plane, you go pick up your bags. She wasn't flying in from a foreign country. She wouldn't have to go through customs. She would basically get off the plane and she could just technically leave the airport. So why did they pull her off the plane and put her into customs on that end and not in Washington, D.C. when she was trying to board the plane? It was just odd. That's never explained. Secondly, they also detain her because she has knives in her suitcase, and this was a checked bag. It wasn't as though she was trying to bring knives in her carry-on. So again, okay, but you can do that. And then third, she mentions that the knives are her only valuable possession that she has left, because when the explosion took out the law firm, it took all of her possessions with it as well. So was she living in the law office? It's just very confusing. It left me kind of scratching my head. So I think that there are some issues with this one that I'm not sure that I, based on one chapter, am willing to let go, as I'm judging everything else based on one chapter. The final nominee in this category is KT Nguyen's You Know What You Did. Now, this was my prediction for winning Best First at Left Coast Crime, and it did not. It was Ghost of Waikiki. I still say that this one may be in the running as my prediction here, but I'm kind of stacking everything on the Ghost of Waikiki because it won before. But we are introduced to Annie. Annie is an artist, and she's happily married to her husband. She has a teenage daughter. Everything is right in the world, except when we get into the book, at the very, very beginning, Annie is with her deceased mother, who has a knife, and there is a lot of blood everywhere. And Annie is saying some things that are pretty self-incriminatory. Now, she calls her husband, Duncan, and basically when he gets home, she convinces him that they should move the body. And he is immediately like, no, he can't do that. And she explains to him that she's really afraid. She's really worried about what's going to happen. And she convinces him to move the body. Now, it is a little bit later, not a long time later, just a little bit later. And Annie and Duncan's teenage daughter, Tabby, wants to plan her grandmother's funeral with Annie, and Annie is trying to explain to her that they are not going to give her mother a funeral, and that really upsets Tabby. At the same time, Annie is preparing for this potentially career-making interview with a magazine, and she's waiting for a reporter to show up at the house, and she's worried that doing the interview is the right thing to do. It's career making. However, are they going to dig into her and find some deep, dark secrets? And Duncan wants her to postpone. You've just been through a lot. Your mom just died. I think you should really postpone this. And she's worried that if she postpones it, they will pass on her and they won't come back and interview her again. So she's got to do it. Now, when the person from the magazine shows up, it's actually just an intern. It is not a reporter, and they're just discussing what type of interview it's going to be. It's really just going to be a Q&A type of a thing. But the intern is, she's making kind of a pass at Duncan in front of Annie, and she's eyeing Annie's house really, it just seems kind of shady. And we just get the perception that Annie's really, really worried. She's got a lot of secrets, and she's really, really afraid of being exposed. Now, again, the Agathas are supposed to be for the best traditional mysteries. They're called Agathas because they're named after Agatha Christie. I do not think that You Know What You Did is a traditional mystery. It's really coming across very thrillery. And so I would not vote for it. Will the actual voters vote for it? I don't know. I think we should stick with Ghosts of Waikiki again. And so yes, I am being swayed by its success at Left Coast Crime to make that my prediction and my vote as well. But I do think it's probably, Ghosts of Waikiki is probably the strongest book in the category yet again. The final category that I am going to discuss for the Agathas is Best Children or Young Adult Mystery. The first nominee is Josh Patcher's First Week Free at the Roomy Toilet. And this is a mystery about Junie Knight, who is a 14-year-old commercial actress. She's been doing dog food commercials for several years, and her contract is just about to expire. She and her agent are concerned that she's not going to get any more work after her contract expires. And so Morty, her agent, comes up with this publicity scheme that Junie will go to court to be emancipated from her parents at 14, and this will bring her some notoriety, and potentially the publicity will get her more acting gigs. Now, from the synopsis, she's going to move into a boarding house because she's emancipated, and once she's there, things are going to begin going missing, and she's going to have to investigate to defend herself. It's an interesting concept. It seemed cute, and Junie seems like at 14, she's not overly precocious. She seems like a 14-year-old. However, there was a really weird line from Morty to her that really turned me off, and so I wouldn't vote for this one, unfortunately. It was just a weird comment for a 60-year-old man to make to a 14-year-old girl. The next nominee is KB Jackson for the Sasquatch of Harriman Lake. And KB Jackson actually has 2 books in this series nominated in this category. So this is the first one. It's earlier in the series. And we have 12-year-olds Jake, Jasmine, and Lanny, who have created the Sasquatch Hunters of Washington, or show, because they want to investigate Sasquatch sightings. That is hard to say repeatedly. Since there aren't that many sightings, let's face it, they decide, oh, now that we've formed our little group, we should take on some extra cases or other cases just to get experience investigating. And so that brings them to classmate Danielle's barn, where she's hiring them because someone has destroyed her piñatas the day before her birthday party. This just seems really sweet and very exciting, with the potential for Bigfoot sightings and Bigfoot investigations. So I really like this one. The next nominee I actually have on my Kindle. It is Francis Schoenmaker's Sid Johnson and the Well-Intentioned Conspiracy. Now it's 1856, and Sid Johnson and his family are part of a wagon train from Illinois to California. At the same time, we meet Abraham Bierman. He is on a steamboat on the Missouri River, and he's alone, and somebody has stolen all his money, but he's eventually hoping to meet up with his older brother's trading company wagons to rejoin them. At the same time, there's a group of Kansa indigenous people who have been basically out on the trail for 2 days looking for horses that have been stolen from them, because it's imperative for them to survive that they have horses to use for trading and for bartering their crops, etc. So we have these 3 groups basically at 3 different locations all along the same trail, and according to the synopsis, we are told that Sid is also carrying a letter that's been given to him from a man that he trusts, but he's asked to deliver it in Santa Fe, and he's told it is a family secret kind of letter, but actually it may be associated to Spanish treasure. This book sounds very thrilling and adventurous. Again, I'm not sure if it's a traditional mystery. And I will say that based upon some of the themes and everything that are brought into play here, and just by reading some of the reviews of this book, this may be the one that is my prediction for who the voters are going to vote for. But I don't personally think that this is going to fall into the category of a traditional mystery. The next nominee is the other KB Jackson, which is The Big Gray Man of Ben McDowey. Ben McDowey. Again, we're back with Jake, Jasmine, and Lanny. And they have no case at the beginning. They're trying to figure out how to scheme to convince their parents to take them to Forks, Washington to go visit the Sasquatch Museum. At the same time, Jake's mom and dad have just gotten back together after being separated for several years, maybe even divorced, but separated for sure. And he's not sure, even though this is what he's been wanting, he's not sure how he feels about it. I just read the first chapter. I do like Jackson's writing. I still think that Sasquatch of Harriman Lake is probably would be stronger for me of the two. Still not what would get my vote though. The thing that would get my vote is the final book in the category, which is James Ponty's The Sherlock Society. Alex Sherlock is 12, his sister Zoe is 13, and they are with their 73-year-old grandfather. And when we start the book, they are in the ocean off the coast of Miami, and they have just been on a boat that has exploded. And so they've decided to start a detective agency as their summer jobs because they're tired of babysitting and pet walking and low pay for boring and hard jobs. So they're going to take advantage of having the last name Sherlock and form a detective agency. So I'm sure we need to go backwards before we need to go forward. Like, how did they get on this boat? Why were they on this boat? Why did it explode? What the heck is going on? However, it immediately jumps into the action. And I love a situation where a grandparent is along for the ride and the dynamic of that. So the Sherlock Society would get my vote in this category. I do think Sid Johnson is my prediction for what the voters will vote for. Thanks for watching. I hope I did that faster. I think I really did do that faster than I did the Left Coast Crime, and there were actually more books in this one. The awards are being given tonight, probably really close to the time that I'm going to get this video uploaded. So we'll see how my predictions do. We'll see how my voting does. And I'll come back afterwards in another video and we'll talk through what won and maybe actually read the books. So tell your pets I said hi. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.